feel like the title of this was probably a little misleading because JSS on Azure PaaS, which would probably take me about 8 hours to talk through all that. So what this really is as Brent was saying, so we kind of all this activity started with a greenfield project with a customer portal. That was all great, and just kind of clean slate to start with. Somewhere along the line, then working with the client, they had an existing A2 site, decided to pull that over into the Greenfield 9 site, which then made it, we didn't know if we call it like Bluefield or something. It's not Brownfield, it's not Greenfield. What field is that? And then make it all play together. So we started out with this wonderful Greenfield thing, and GSS, we're going to do all the whiz-bang things. Moved the A2 over, and in doing that, it was MVC Razor decided to make that GSS React as well, so that everything would just be all one. So it's been a journey. So we've actually launched one of the sites in the customer portal. I think it was out in the next couple of months. So it's been interesting. So what I wanted to talk about here, just to whittle it down into a half hour or whatever, so is just some of the lessons learned. So let me ask a couple questions. Has everybody here at least familiar with GSS, worked with GSS? You're well into a project already? What's kind of I have no idea what GSS even means. No? No idea? Okay, so it's kind of funny to me because I always thought GSS was like jazzy Sitecore or something, but it's just JavaScript services. It's like the most boring name ever for like completely redoing the way that Sitecore interacts and whatnot. Oh, sorry, I've actually got a little about me. So this is my information. I took a picture in front of a field of flags like on 4th of July, and I had a designer friend of mine decided to take it to the next level. So that's I wish my arms were that big. I just don't have that much time to work out. So so real quickly, I'll just I have a couple slides here on what GSS is. Very simply, so it's funny, I've read a couple articles, and a lot of people like to say, well, Sitecore's been headless since like 6X because they had the item API. And I'm like, sure, if you want to go through that pain of calling an item API and trying to build a front end, I guess it's headless, But in my opinion, it's Sitecore 9 is where they really truly made an effort to become headless. Of course, you go from MVC Razor views and rendered CSHTML to where they actually abstracted a service where a front end can call, receive JSON, and build a page using Angular, Vue, what have you. I'm keeping this short and tight, obviously, with that. So the LayoutService is a brand new service with them that actually you can call from any kind of front end client that gives you the JSON to allow you to build components with your placeholders and all the bits and parts and pieces that let you put together the page. They added a dictionary service, just a kind of key value query type of thing. And then if you want to get fancy, with the GA that came out, GraphQL is awesome now in the Sitecore stack. And then of course they still have the services client, the item API, all the other kind of out-of-the-box things that came with that. So they call it a set of APIs and services. Again, went real whole hog with the cool names on this that they could have done. And kind of the bits and pieces, like I just said, come together. You start out with their SDK, which are just ePam packages. And if you go to and I have a link later on, if you go to just the gss.sitecore.com, which threw everybody because it was gss.sitecore.net originally, they have starter kits for Vue, Angular, React Native, and you can type a couple of GSS start lines and be up and running on your first Sitecore GSS project. So one thing I will say with this is that they have done a fantastic job of putting those packages together for that. I mentioned LayoutService, the kind of the bits and pieces of what those all come together. You're not going to dig too deep into that, but instead of basically the nutshell, instead of MVC Razor View rendering, you're not going to call an endpoint and retrieve JSON. Real quickly, so if you really want to dig into it and play with it, let me jump down. Here's a couple of resources, gss.sitecore.com. It's a funny story, when we first started talking to the client about this, it was still TP 3 or 4, I think it was 4, I can't remember now, was it 4? TP 4, I think? I don't remember. Anyways, so we were talking to them about explaining what it was, and because it was a technical preview, saying, well, there's probably some risk here involved with this. Sent them to the old gss.sitecore.net site. It looked like somebody had built it in their basement in like 2002. It was like tables and squares, and I was kind of embarrassed because like, hey, here's this hot technology of a website company, and it looks like I don't know, some guy learning HTML in beginner's class. Now it looks actually like a roll-up site, like I said there. Sitecore Slack, I'm on there all the time. I have asked really dumb questions and embarrassed myself. I've answered questions, so it's a great community if you want to look at that. And of course, everybody Stack Exchange. I love the new Stack Overflow keyboard that they came out with there.
Never.
Right, never copy and paste, right? No, so some really great, not just the fact that it's extremely easy to start up something and just get rolling with it and playing with it, but there's a ton of help, great community, so all that's out there for you. So one of the things I want to talk about today, not really just about how do I make a JSS website, but now that we've gone through a project, I think we started March of last year, April of last year, somewhere around there. And of course now we're 15 months in, it's been greenfield, then brownfield, then something else field where it came together, and just all sorts of fun stuff that's been happening. So some things that we've learned that if you come into a project, whether you're like a consultant coming in and trying to pick up a new project for a client, or if it's just something your company's wanting to bring in-house, I think it still applies both ways. The first thing that was very interesting and something to wrap your head around is resourcing. We very quickly discovered, probably about 6 weeks into the project, that we were way heavy on Sitecore and way light on front end. In our case, React was the framework we chose, and that way. So we had to kind of slowly say, well, shoot, how do we kind of right the ship here and squeeze that out? So what I've seen, and this is not a scientific thing, is that the ratio is typically 1 to 3. So you'd have 3 front end. I think I have that backwards. It should be the other way, yeah. So it's 3 front end basically to 1 back end developer. Again, kind of depends a little bit on what you have, but that's what we're seeing is a pretty comfortable ratio. The other thing that's a little bit different, and this is something that I've fought with for many years, is that because everything that or most of the things that you're working on, you're calling basically a single GSS controller, and the front end's doing all the work. Most of what have happened with large teams is that a front-end team will come in, they'll slice and dice the HTML and CSS, and they'll create like a style library or pattern library or whatever you call that, and they say, okay, back-end developers, here's how you build your razor views, here's all the HTML stuff you do. And of course, when I was doing mostly C#, I'd be like, why does this guy have 6 divs, and I don't know why this class doesn't go here, and I'm trying to copy and paste from his style library, and then, stick in my Sitecore fields and whatever. A lot of that goes away, and it is wonderful because your front-end developers are writing front-end code and fixing front-end code and doing the things they know how to do, rather than this whole handoff and good luck C# guys trying to figure out HTML and whatnot that goes with that. So that's been an interesting thing that's happened. That's been a bonus. The other thing we see with this too, and this is just a little bit of a different approach that I wasn't familiar with, is that we discovered that we'd have, in our group, we'd have an HTML, like the slice and dicer, we'd have a Sitecore content backend kind of person, and then a React person, and we were kind of having them work together. And like, okay, let's you guys put this together. But then the HTML person would be done, so let's say it's a 5-point story, it's a sprint, whatever, let's say it's a sprint, the HTML person would be done on Monday, the Sitecore person would be done on Wednesday, and then the React person would finish at the end of the sprint, because it's so much more weighted. So we had to kind of rethink and rearrange the way that we worked with some of the resources to put the right people in the right weights with that. So interesting thing that, again, just until you really think about that, the fact that, and we, because we migrated the site, there is some back-end code there. For the greenfield approach, it's like React is this much, and Sitecore C# is like about this much. You have some content search and some normal C# stuff you're going to have to do. But by far your large majority part of that is front-end stuff. One of the things that we see, and a lot of people debate, whether you can be full stack or if you have to be an expert in front-end or back-end, you can't do both. And we try to do full stack as much as possible. But one of the things you notice is that with this, onboarding a React engineer is to do front-end work with Sitecore is much simpler than it maybe has been in the past, because in the end, when you're querying Sitecore GSS, you're saying, give me JSON. And JSON is just JSON. Now, I'm oversimplifying. You have to kind of at least understand what a placeholder is, some different pieces. But, technically at the end, give me JSON. I know what JSON is. I know how to drop it into a page, put it into a list, whatever. So it does at least simplify the learning curve for some of that. I think I might have mentioned a couple of these. It does lend itself to, I would say, to more of a full stack approach. Because you're writing most of the stuff in React, you can still learn Sitecore content, but you're not typically writing hardcore C# code all the time. So you kind of don't have to be this top of the line C# developer, while at the same time being the world's best React developer. Again, we try to go towards full stack. I know there's some opinions and debates, but the requirement of that is a little less. I mentioned already like the style library handoff, and then the C# devs trying to hack the right class on what I call div spaghetti. It's a little bit better than the days of like the early Bootstrap that you would just download and start throwing grids into everything. And I made great messes of that kind of stuff. So that's just kind of one piece of that. The other thing that has kind of evolved a little bit over some of the last pieces are how to start a project and what mode to use. There's basically 4 modes, with one actually being sort of a newish one. There's disconnected mode, which is where if you say, we don't have Sitecore, we haven't bought it, we can't even get a developer license, I don't know why you couldn't do that, but just say that's a scenario. You can start the disconnected mode, and you basically are just using YAML files, using mock data, is what I would call it. This is something that I would say you should probably be much more knowledgeable about Sitecore if you're a front-end developer, because you're basically going to take those YAML files and basically push them into Sitecore at some point. So making sure that flow works correctly, that bringing on just that React kind of JSON kind of goes out the window. So you have to. So this is something that's, I would say, you got to be pretty brave about. We right now currently use a connected mode, and Evgeny is one of our front-end developers that could talk for probably another 4 hours about this. Where you have a Sitecore instance, you're actually speaking to that Sitecore instance as you develop. But you can make changes to your front end, change some CSS, change a module, some drop-down behavior, and just refresh your front end piece without like having to recompile Sitecore code or do any of that fun stuff in the back end. So that's kind of still using Sitecore as your point, but your front end is a little more separated and able to work with. Integrated mode is just basically full server-side rendering. If you were to do this, you would want to recompile everything. This is typically your production mode, so when your CD is running, it's in this integrated mode. Although, and there is the headless SSR mode, which is basically what Sitecore, if you read in the JSS documentation, Sitecore is saying this is what you should use in a heavy production website. And basically what this is JSS services are served through Node. With this approach, basically you can separate your content delivery server from that Node service and then scale that Node service across whatever you want to do regionally or whatnot. So we're actually right now still in integrated mode, not at this point seeing the performance needs that we would need to go to that, but I'm already working on some ways on how we can actually add that to our CI/CD process. So that's kind of the approach. So I think probably the 2 most important things are the disconnected, connected mode, and how you want to pick those. So just thinking about that up front is something that is good to do. A few things just about, and by the way, I'm bouncing from resourcing to Azure to JSS and just kind of the things we've learned from Sitecore 9 and JSS all together, so bouncing around a little bit. Some design considerations, if you think about what I just said, is that now that, I'll pick a number, 80% of your code is in front-end React, how does Helix work with that? Helix is separating your Visual Studio projects and keeping your code and, everything is separate layers from there. So how does that play into it? And it's a thought process. So what we decided to do, and I don't know that this is the absolute perfect best practice, was the client code, React code, CSS, we actually put that into the Helix pattern. So if you look at our project, you'll see a client folder that has a React code, and we decided to modularize those and put those with that. If somebody came up and said, hey, I have a better idea and a better approach, sure, we're willing to listen to that, but that was what made sense to us. Because we were bringing over a legacy product that was based somewhat on Helix, we decided to keep that same pattern. But it's worth a conversation and a thought, like how you want to handle that as you pick up a new project or move into Helix. One of the things we've noticed is that with like Glass Mapper and ORM, because again 90% of your stuff is talking, hey Sitecore, give me JSON. You don't run into as many or as much of a need for some of that. If you still have complex content, that some of that helps with that. But I think you have a little more flexibility with pieces of those because you're not just running full C# top to bottom. Angular, React, Vue, OMI, put on there. That's another debate that probably could rage for hours and hours. You know, in our framework, we went with React. That's kind of my preference, but I'm sure some people would probably like duke it out with me over anything else. Some people are like, well, but Vue is easier and it's simpler, and you know, the Angular is a real framework, and you know, I've heard all the arguments and debates back and forth. The nice thing is, again, on the jss.sitecore.com site, they have starter projects for all of those, plus React Native, if I remember correctly. So pick your poison and go with that. A big thing too with Sitecore 9, you know, because they've tried to go more omni-channel and pull an XConnect out, they have all this, they've added GraphQL, they have the whole layout service. I think giving a lot more consideration into how you can leverage mobile apps to consume that, so that you can try to keep your content the same. It's something that we're actually still trying to work on. We're looking at serving up data, then we'd love to at some point try to get them to pick up their content from the layout service. There was a separate track and we were working through it, so unfortunately we didn't get a chance to make it as cool as we wanted to, but definitely thinking about the services up front, talking with the mobile team is worth your while. And then the last thing is that, especially with GraphQL, which we've been trying to push with some success, is that, for example, we have several different services that are going to be called from the Sitecore platform. One is, for example, a reporting service that loads a report. Well, they want to show that report with columns across the top with translated values. And we're like, well, heck, just call Sitecore, say, give me this item that has these 10 fields in French, and voila, here's your, voila, excuse the pun, here's your result. You know, and that's been a little tricky. We talked about maybe using the dictionary service. The funny thing is we have all these values that we're using in content, and they said, well, just put them all in a dictionary. Like, well, yeah, but then you're managing them in content where the content editors use them, and then I also have them in a dictionary, and who makes sure those stay in sync, and down the rabbit hole we go with that. One of the things, because Sitecore has such, I feel like, such an easier way to access it besides the old item API type of calls, using what we're trying to do right now is actually say, hey, Sitecore is the translation source of truth. If anything across a thing, you know, they're using regex files in some places and who knows what else and other things. So what we're trying to say is Sitecore does translations and it does it really, really well. I mean, it's probably one of the best things it does. Why not use it as your source of truth for everything? You know, you can call it 6 different ways. So another thing to think about coming into system there. Okay, let me jump completely over to one thing that you should know when you're looking at Sitecore 9, and this is kind of outside of JSS. Redis and ASP.NET are not friends. This is well documented. We have talked to other development teams, we've talked to clients. This has always been just kind of a pain in the butt, excuse my language. But Sitecore has a whole article on this where they've dug into, you know, basically what happens is you're working in a session, you try to call Redis. Redis is slow to respond for some reason, or it's still processing. Your .NET session just sits there and says, nope, can't do this, so I'm just going to wait. So you spin up another one, and then you spin up another one, and you spin up another thread, and then all of a sudden your memory usage is at 80% or 90%, and you don't know why. A couple of things that we did, and I probably saw 40 articles about people fighting this different ways across. So I always try to keep it down to the simple solution that I can. One of the big things we saw is there is a Redis piece in the web config for the connection string, and basically the default out-of-the-box Sitecore piece is the polling interval is 2 seconds. So basically every 2 seconds it's saying, talk to me, talk to me, talk to me, talk to me. Right out, so you change it to 30 seconds, we did that, and immediately the memory usage, basically what would happen in Azure, you'll get a 502 which says, I'm trying to talk to the app service and it's just not responding to me. So we were seeing those, and I was watching the metrics and seeing like the counts in the 40s and 50s. Literally changed that line, and they dropped like down to like the 4s and 5s. So it didn't fix everything, but it chunked it way down. And then again, that article goes into excruciating detail about it. And then Sitecore patch added on there, and it lets you, it gives you more finite control over polling intervals, how long you have a thread waiting for, etc. Did that, and up to this point, you can see a 502 every now and then. I'm guessing it's some kind of network glitch, probably not related to this. So one suggestion that we've seen is that, and I've heard some people say, yeah, this works great. I talked to one guy that said he did it and then ran into some issues, but he had some funky XConnect or XDB things going on, so I don't know if it was that. But one of the things that happen is you can actually split, so out of the box, your .NET session and your XConnect session share the same Redis instance, and you can split those. So then you have, again, you're splitting the traffic across 2 instances. So this is something that plagued me for probably about 2 weeks, so I actually had to make a slide for it by itself. The other thing, and this is something I don't understand why this is not part of the kind of the Sitecore has those recommendations where they say if you're deploying to Azure and you're this marketing site with this many hits, then if you have 1 million, choose the large. If you have 2 million, choose the extra large. One of the things they do not talk about are elastic pools. So when you deploy a Sitecore instance to Azure, you have your master database, core, web, et cetera, those will come out and they will recommend a size, and basically you get DTUs or processing units, and you can be like 50 gigabytes. So it's some set of processing units and some size. We ran into something where when we were logging in, Sitecore tries to check if you have you check Remember Me, so it tries to look in the core database and look for that session. People were logging in, the core database was set to like a 10 DTU, because that's a core database. And at the time we only had like 10 users. And it was just spiked solid going all the way across. And it was because Sitecore was coming in and doing some goofy search, which has a patch that we fixed. But that you sit there and try to log in and wait 20 minutes. You're like, look at this warm up, it's taking a really long time. Anyways, dug into it, figured that out. And Elastic Pool says, basically, give me a box of 500 DTUs, and you set your databases in there, and then they can spike and jump and do whatever they want within that kind of given box. Put that in, have not seen a spike on anything since. So Elastic Pools are your friends here. The one thing I want to mention too, even if you you have 500 DTUs and you've got everything in there and you expect that your analytics is going to get hit really hard, you can say for any of my analytics databases, I want them to never go below 50 DTUs. So of that 500, they will always reserve that 50 and always have that available. So if something's pegging it, then you're not crunching them down to nothing. So it's even more configurable at the bottom. So always put an elastic pool. Don't forget that one. So interesting story we had too. So one of the things that in the customer portal that we worked with was working with Apollo Server and GraphQL. Funny story is that when we first started this project, it was still TP4. GraphQL was in there, but it wasn't really. It's like, hey, we have GraphQL, and that was kind of it. In GA now they're like, oh, here's GraphQL, and here's how you make endpoints, and here's how you do all this cool stuff, and they kind of really brought it to fruition. But when we started, it basically in good faith, we couldn't say, hey, yeah, let's use GraphQL because it's mentioned somewhere in TP Core. But what I want to say is that has greatly matured, has come a long way. GraphQL could be another whole conversation, another whole meeting too. But it's a great technology. It allows you to take multiple APIs in a microservice environment and aggregate those into a single endpoint that gives you just a nice common schema. And instead of me saying, hey API, give me these 10 fields for a user, and that one endpoint gives me back that chunk of data, it can say, here, hey, user API with this profile information, with this account information, these things, here's the 20 fields you can query, pick which 5 you want for this component, or these 10 for this other component, or whatnot. So that's a really fast GraphQL nutshell, I guess. But Sitecore now, the JSS comes with that basically out of the box. You can go through, there's a config file, if you drop it in, and you've got a functioning GraphQL endpoint. It's super, super easy to set up. There's tons of great articles, links about GraphQL as a technology and how you query with it and whatnot. The one thing that's just super annoying right now is you can do the headless proxy where you deploy your layout services anywhere you want across the world. Can't do that right now with GraphQL. We were just talking about this actually over the last couple of weeks. So if you want to use GraphQL on that service, it's now compiled in part of the CP server. So as much as you can do cool things with the layout service and all that, can't do it with GraphQL. So I'm hoping that changes rapidly, and with hopefully another release or two, I need to start looking at maybe 9.3 or who knows, whatever the next version is out there.
Doesn't exist.
Right, exactly. So GraphQL is awesome. I think if I can just put my opinion out there, I think it's going to be part of the wave of the future. I think you'll see a lot more people using it, a lot more projects using it. Just be aware that there is that kind of, just drives me nuts limitation on it too. So. And then one thing, so just to jump back into just maybe some development things, and actually this is something that Evgeny and I talked about. One of the cool things about the layout service, so if I can call in, I can say, hey, I need this page, and Sitecore says, okay, here's the JSON with all the components and layout and placeholders and everything you need to construct that and put that together. One of the cool things you can do is you can actually say, hey, on this page, this isn't really part of the components, but I need this drop down that has a list of things in it so people can select from. And I want to go grab that from another data folder or global folder or whatever I have, because I want to populate the drop down with that. So you can take that layout service and say, hey, layout service, add this list of stuff to my data context so that I can use it on the page in my front end. And that's great. And I think we came into this, we're like, oh yeah, let's grab this list and this list and this item and this list. And we're just putting everything and like, oh, look at all the things we can do. And then like, holy crap, this is this giant, massive list of everything we could possibly do that we're now loading on every page, whether or not we need it, and whatnot. So be a little careful with that, because it's, I come in, there's also a rendering context resolver that you can extend to even do like more cool things like that. Think about that, plan that, say, okay, on this page, this is the thing I need to add to this call so that I only have the data that I have in there. That's one of the things that, it's so cool and new, you just want to throw everything in there that you'll ever use, and let's scale that back just a hair. I could probably go on another 4 hours, it's just dumb little things here and there and bits and pieces. If you get on the Sitecore Slack, you'll see people saying, hey, I just made a new app and I can't understand why my content resolver doesn't work, so all those growing pains and pieces and whatnot. But that's all I had. That's kind of the high level overview. I wanted to mention too, so we have actually a couple guys back here that are actually all the way from Belarus, so 5,000 miles away from home. They're in 3 1/4 there. So they've been on the development team. Of course, Mike obviously is here in the U.S., so you don't count. You're not special. But I'm sure they'd be happy to talk as well if you have questions. But that's all I have. Thank you. I'm sorry.
I came just for the user.
Exactly.
So I have questions.
Yes, sir.
I have lots of questions.
Okay.
Because I feel like I struggle with the why JSS question. Sometimes I'll just wake up in the middle of the night and be like, why is this a thing? So I'm trying to understand the true benefits of using JSS over MVC and Razor.
Okay.
Right? I'm still also trying to understand the benefits of using MVC and Razor over web forms.
So, fair.
Partially because it worked. Right, and I know lots of people hate web forms, but
I hate it.
Why does everyone hate web? No, anyway, you know what?
I hate web forms because I did ASP before there was .NET.
And
.NET.
before that.
Yeah.
Oh God.
But you look at it, here's the thing. .NET sucks for websites. It always did. It was like they lost everything that they had. The ASP was light. ASP was fright. And then you got this thing that okay, cool, you can make a website with this, but I have all of this crap and all these ridiculous IP things and all this other stuff that is totally not needed to deliver a website, which is what a lot of .NET site, that's what you use .NET for. Mostly was doing websites. They lost something there. When you went to MVC and you went to Razor, you were kind of like, okay, wait a minute, I can take this back to a little more what it was. I mean, all of that stuff that I was point, but it was it was overkill for what you were doing, and it was always aggravating to go, if you looked at the stuff, see, here's the thing, I was a terrible .NET developer. If you looked at all the stuff that we did, it looked an awful lot. We did everything really light. He's seen something good. And we treated them like Razor pages. We didn't templatize stuff. We tried to do loops and stuff like that because that's what we came from.
Yeah.
And so when we went to MVC, it was a lot easier transition for us to go to MVC from a Sitecore perspective when we did, because our stuff already was built like that.
You know what I think?
Because it was lighter.
You know what I think would be a really fun topic for a future session here? I would love to just do a discussion about that, because I love throwing that bomb. I think web forms was a better way to do this than MVC, and I think it would be fun to have a battle royale with foam swords, but also actually discussing it, because I think there's a lot to be learned about what's really important about delivering web pages with managed content that we can get to through talking with that. So I don't want to derail this conversation.
Getting back to what you'd asked John the first question about the MVC part is, why the JSS? And I think that's an important. I think that's an important. Yeah, but the why the JSS was client need. I mean, John can explain why. We didn't just go do it because we thought it was the nifty thing to do. That wasn't the driver.
Right, I know like a lot of places will do that, but why did the client want to do that?
So I think it was several things. So number one, they were moving from, so they already had kind of a, what's the buzzword, digital transformation, I think is the thing you say now, you know.
DTI.
And their idea was like, you know, they were still doing like ETLs and like heavy clunky things. And they were, you know, setting up all these new APIs that were calling into the right databases, and they were trying to become more nimble, become more, you know, I don't know, the microservice is getting old now, it's nano service is the new thing, you know, but they were just getting the microservice at a point. And so several things. Number one is that I think that was part of it, was to come in alignment with them. They had already worked with A2. They felt it was a little monolithic. Then we said, well, 9 is a step in the direction of becoming a little more nimble. So XConnect now is omni-channel, you know, where so you can actually ping things from other channels. Instead of it being just a big MVC chunk of DLLs, now you have the service that you can actually scale and spread out. That is just JSON that can be consumed for anything, mobile app, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So there were just those little bits and pieces that kind of came together for them. I also think that, so now I'll switch to my opinion, I think that, you know, Sitecore is trying to move from being called a CMS to be a framework. And you know, that's a big broad statement, you know, but so I think they want to say, hey, here's a layout, this isn't just a CMS, here's this layout service that you can consume from any application, you know, mobile, desktop, whatever that is, and here's this cool service. Hey, by the way, this XConnect now is a separate service that you can ping from anywhere and do anything you want. So now it's like, here's this cool service, oh, now you can do GraphQL, I hope, it's a separate service. So now you have like, Sitecore's kind of breaking itself apart a little bit, so it's not just plonk, here's this CMS, independent, you know.
Do you think though that is chasing edge cases with the project, like with the product, right? Like if you think about what the like mainstream Sitecore development is, right? Build a website. Do you think that that's just them kind of chasing this idea of like, there are maybe 1 in 100 clients who want to do that, and so they're forcing everyone into that mode. Or not forcing, but
forcing. I mean, like in the case of this client, one of their looking at their roadmap was to, hey, we want to build native apps that consume the same stuff. Oh, and can it down the road also consume the personalization stuff? And that was a thing. And Room who's sitting next to me, he and I have actually, on a very older version of Sitecore, attempted to do the same damn thing. And it was awful.
Yeah.
But the need was there. The boss man sold something and said it has to work this way. And we went, wow, it doesn't work that way. And we worked on trying to figure it out. This client has the same need, although not immediately, but down the road. And because it's greenfield, like you know, that throws an extra piece into it. And granted, we ended up migrating something that was a little more difficult, but when it started out, it was greenfield, like, that was like, oh, you want to do this. You're looking at your roadmap, you want to get to this point where you're consuming this stuff. That's the way to do it. Because if we did it the other way, we would probably have to rewrite it to do what they want. Or write a whole bunch of more code to do it. So there are, and we've had internal discussions about JSS, where it's like, do we recommend JSS? Several internal discussions on our Sitecore, you know, competency stuff, threads on, do we recommend JSS? And the answer is not yes. The answer is sometimes. And this was definitely the sometimes.
Well, and I think that, you know, in my you know, prior life, you know, I did Sitecore and then also just custom development. And the big thing is like, people love Angular, and it's Angular. And with Angular, you know, it's the same concept. So forget Sitecore. With Angular, you can just have some backend APIs and have a complete website. You don't need MVC and Razor views, and that's more of a spa probably kind of app that you're looking at, you know. But I think just the industry outside of Sitecore is like saying, hey, front end, you know, Angular, React, and you know, whatever framework comes down the road that you want to work with, and I think that, and also what I'm seeing, and it's kind of funny because my daughter's actually in school, is that people can go in, pick up some JavaScript, and start rocking and rolling in a much faster time than you're writing really good dependency injection, solid principle C# code. So I
Yeah.
think there's some of that as well. I'm just kind of spitballing things, but.
I mean, that was one of the things that I've always thought about with it, that like one of the major reasons why JSS has an appeal is because of, when you were talking about the 3-to-1 ratio, right? And that there are many, many, many more front-end developers in the world than there are us Sitecore people.
Yep.
Right? And it's because, hell, was it like Minecraft scripts or something is written in it? So
Yeah.
kids, 10-year-old kids are teaching themselves JavaScript for the same reason that I taught myself, DOS batch commands 20 years ago so that I could play with better video games. But that's a skill set that is available and I feel like can actually bring some of the escalating costs of owning Sitecore down.
Also, it is very lightweight for the kids to learn,
Mhm.
It's a C#
Yeah.
Yeah, you go to Code Academy and it'll take you through
Yeah.
30 lessons.
Oh yeah, and I mean honestly, writing JavaScript is really easy because you write it, you load the page in your browser and it's there.
Right.
You don't have to you don't have to compile it. You don't have to set up
Yeah,
your.
the beginning is gonna have words
It's
later.
very funny to listen from guys. So front-end development is not so easy. It's not just a script writing. We have compilation, transpilation, we have bundling, we have minifying, we have webpack for it. It's more complex.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
talking about a small script, we just handles one button click. Okay, that's easy. You can load it to the page, but connected with GSS, with server-side rendering, with all these items and
Well,
shape.
that's why if we all of a sudden.
No, I understand, but even when we try to involve new people to project, sometimes it's very difficult to find correct developer.
Oh yeah,
To
absolutely.
understand, I don't agree with the point that, that there are a lot of front-end developers, and that is why this changed. I suppose, in my point of view, server-side rendering kills MVC rendering, because
Yeah.
it's very difficult to inject new frameworks or like React,
Yep.
Angular into MVC view,
Yep,
or
exactly.
rather,
Exactly.
and you want to do the same as you do on client, you want to do it on server side,
Mhm.
and that is why we have this headless approach with GSS, GSS gives us. It's not about, for me, it's like, we have a lot of front-end developers, let's make headless.
Well, I mean, I think a lot. I wasn't kidding about you can do it where you just make your change, load it in the browser, right? And I think that what's really interesting is that because of all the stuff that you were just saying, that's why front-end developers are valuable again, right? There was a period where it was okay, these guys were just tracers.
They're just writing JavaScript and there you go, I'm done.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Now, granted, there's still a lot of hacks out there, right? There are a lot of but if you look at it and you say, okay, maybe 10% of the people who call themselves a JavaScript developer or a front-end developer are actually professional grade enough to do this stuff, right?
Yes.
That 10% is still 10% of a much bigger pool than the 10% of the .NET developers out there, right?
Well, and he's right, and the thing that's different is, and yes, you do, like I said, you don't just, some guy says, hey, I know JavaScript, and you start
Right.
running, it's for example, we use TypeScript in the
Yeah.
project, which is another thing that
Yeah.
gives us a lot of rigor, that is another thing to learn,
Yeah.
and on and on. But what I can see with that is that, yes, you have to know TypeScript, yes, you know how to do unit testing, yes, you have to know the rigor and be good at that, but you don't have to learn the entirety of everything about how Sitecore works
Right.
to be able to do
Right,
it.
and in order to actually do it, you don't have to
Right.
you don't have to spend 2 days fighting with your SIF script,
Right.
realizing that the version of Solar that you set up on your local machine is the wrong version,
I
right?
knew Solar was gonna come.
And I don't count him getting because he also is a C# developer, so
Okay.
he doesn't get
Yes,
complained about
so-
it.
No.
I'm
In
kidding,
fact,
I'm
I think
kidding,
that
I'm
gives you
kidding.
the best perspective on it
Yeah.
because you've done, you've seen both sides and
Yeah.
no, I mean, that actually is a really good point, right? That, but I guess what I was also getting at with okay, you can just do it in a text editor and load it up in your browser, is that if you have kids kind of getting into the pipeline of how do you go from being a dumb kid playing Minecraft to someone like you, right? You can, those first couple of steps, it's a lot easier to learn how to take those first couple of steps in JavaScript and then hone those skills than it is, no kids out there learning C#.
Yeah.
right, for fun.
It's not open source, see. The first
Yeah, I
thing
mean, that's-
It's
if-
not,
yep.
it's, for example, actually, one of our friend's son, he's in a college out. They start learning the open source frameworks, right?
Mhm.
Some of them, it's easy to download, they can run in their, in a very small machine.
Mhm.
There's still, I'm not saying, the front-end developers, they're easy to do stuff, I'm not getting into that argument, I'm saying getting into the platform is easy.
Yeah.
For the front-end
Yeah,
developers.
but easier,
Exactly.
it is becoming to involve them easier now with GSS, because previously you have to teach them like Razor,
Yep.
all this, and okay, they can say, oh, Razor is easy, but you have to install Visual Studio.
SQL Server running.
So the number
Yeah.
one reason is to get to use Notepad or Visual Studio Code.
Yeah,
That's the number one reason.
Yeah,
That's it right there.
yeah, no, I believe it, I
Yeah.
believe it. No, yeah, so I guess then the next question is, how do you get a front-end developer to be like comfortable enough with the Sitecore concepts to do this, right? Because like Sitecore offers Sitecore developer training, and you hire someone and they have .NET experience and you want to convert them into a Sitecore developer, you send them to Sitecore training, and then they're at least started, right? But they don't have an equivalent of that for JSS right now.
Yeah.
Like, so what was it? Actually, you don't count because you've been a C# developer. But like, what was your experience in finding people's, climbing up that learning curve of like, understanding what a placeholder is?
Well, and I can tell you, because if you look at like the interviews, a lot of them are more heavily weighted. Do you know how can you work with TypeScript? Do you know, like NPM packages and et cetera, et cetera. That's a lot of those questions that you would never have asked a Sitecore developer before,
Yeah.
typically.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. And what we do, and again, these guys actually sit in more closely than I am. But it's like, okay, we know you know React, we know you know how to consume JSON, we know you know those basic pieces. Here's what the LayoutService does, and here's how it works.
Mhm.
Here's a small component, maybe a title and description.
Yeah.
And start with that small component as part of the introduction to Sitecore or whatever. So it's not like, well, you're a great React developer, good luck with Sitecore.
Yeah.
It's the little baby thing,
So
right,
have you actually formalized your training, drawing the analogy to like flying planes, but have you like formalized your like conversion training process with that, or is that still a thing you're trying to figure out?
Yeah.
Regarding training here, we don't have like a specific or defined lessons or whatever it could be. A bit more about interview to what John said. In interview, we always ask about past experience, and sometimes it's valuable when person works with another CMS system. It could be WordPress, for instance, Drupal, so on and so forth. So it doesn't matter because concept of content management system is the same. Sitecore with WordPress, it doesn't matter. But it's not a major factor. But then when person is onboarded, is on onboarding phase to our project, we for instance, we schedule some pair programming session because what front-end developer have to know is just content management. That's it. There is no need to know what's processor is, what's request pipeline is, what's Solar is, so on and so forth.
Yeah, like the list of things that they need to learn is like 5 things. Like, okay, let me explain context to you. Let me explain a placeholder to you. This is a field. These are the field types. Now you're good to go. It's not like, okay, well, this is how you set up your config.
Let's start with pipelines.
Yeah.
So it's pretty easy. Just pair programming, couple sessions.
So there you go. So that's straight from the
That's awesome.
mouth. That's I think I completely agree. The learning curve, I would say, is again, if you have a good, again, I'm not saying Joe JavaScript guy can just walk in the door. A good React developer's learning curve is significantly less. So hey.
Yeah, so the question is around, like you kind of said that it is a greenfield, brownfield and bluefield, whatever you make. So when a customer is already on Sitecore 9 and marketers go to the symposiums and they hear Sitecore JSS is this, SX is here and all that. So do you recommend that any customer is already using, has Sitecore implemented and someone says, can we use JSS? They're like a front-end team, to be a smaller team, they want to have the freedom to start building up their own wireframes or their own screens. Do you think that's still recommended for a customer to invest?
That goes back a little bit to the conversation, the first question, which why JSS?
Right.
I would say if they heard it in a cool speech, probably not a good reason to go JSS. If they had, I might be silly, but if you have a front-end team that you think could really add value, I have not done it, but JSS supports both JSS and MVC, allegedly. I have not put that together and actually said, okay, here's a site running with JSS and MVC at the same time. Allegedly, that could be done. So you might be able to say, okay, this new feature, assuming that I'm correct with that, and that actually works exactly as I described it, this new feature could be JSS while everything else is MVC. When we did the Greenfield Brownfield, again, Greenfield was all JSS React. The 2 site that we migrated was all MVC. As those came over, we changed them to React as we brought them over. So in my case, it was completely from MVC to JSS. So I haven't tried the double approach. But because Sitecore can take your request and send it where you need to go, it should accept a request from JSS and from MVC.
Okay.
So that's maybe something to check into.